The bread is still warm. The priests at the Temple of Ra finished the morning offering 20 minutes ago. Fresh duck, barley beer, a lit oil lamp placed before the statue of the sun god at the exact second the first light touched the Nile. This ritual has not changed in 1,500 years. Not once. Not a single morning missed. The market at Memphis is already loud. Children running between columns painted in gold and lapis blue. The smell of emmer wheat bread drifting over the water. Fishermen pulling nets from a river so clean and so dependable that an entire civilization was built on the promise that it would always be this way. Nobody in this city knows what today is. Not the priests, not the fishermen, not the bread sellers, not the most powerful man on earth sitting in his palace on the eastern bank of the Nile, surrounded by generals and scribes and advisors managing the largest empire the ancient world has ever seen. They are about to find out, because somewhere on the edge of this city, an 80-year-old shepherd is walking back in through the gates. He was a prince here once. He knows every corridor of that palace. He knows how the court thinks. He knows what Pharaoh had for breakfast. And he is carrying a message that is going to unmake everything. This is what life looked like in Egypt the morning the 10 plagues began. Before we talk about the plagues, we need to talk about what Egypt actually was, because the version most people carry in their heads is wrong. Egypt in 1446 BC is not a primitive civilization scraping by in the desert. It is the most sophisticated nation on Earth. The Great Pyramid at Giza had already been standing for over 1,000 years before Moses was born. Think about that number carefully. From Moses looking backward, the pyramids were as ancient to him as the Norman conquest of England is to us today. Egypt didn't build the pyramids and then stop. It kept going for another 1,400 years. Memphis, the capital, is a city of somewhere between 30,000 and 100,000 people, one of the largest urban centers anywhere on the planet. It has what we would recognize as a postal system. Couriers carrying sealed messages on papyrus scrolls between government offices across 600 miles of empire. It has banks, grain storage institutions where farmers deposited crops in good years and withdrew in bad ones. It has doctors performing surgery, not guessing, performing surgery. The Ebers Papyrus, discovered in 1872, is an Egyptian medical text from this exact period. 747 separate prescriptions, treatments for infections and tumors, surgical procedures for the skull. They knew the heart pumps blood through the body over 1,000 years before anyone in Greece figured it out. And the Nile. You cannot understand Egypt without understanding the Nile. Every year, between June and September, the river floods. Not catastrophically, precisely, generously, predictably. It deposits a layer of dark mineral-rich silt called kemet, black land, which is actually where the word Egypt comes from. That black strip along the riverbank, never more than a few miles wide, is some of the most fertile soil anywhere on Earth. 2 miles past the flood line in either direction, desert, rock, nothing. The entire civilization exists in a thin corridor you could walk across in 2 hours. The Egyptians know this. They worship it. Over 2,000 named deities in their religious system. 2,000, each one controlling a piece of the natural world. Ra governs the sun. Hapi is the god of the Nile flood itself, depicted as a blue-green figure with a hanging belly and lotus flowers. A god of abundance so important that his name appears in inscriptions from every dynasty for 3,000 years. Heket is the frog-headed goddess of fertility and childbirth. Sobek is the crocodile god who lives in the river. Hathor is the cow goddess. Khnum, the ram-headed god, fashioned all of humanity out of Nile clay on a potter's wheel. Every single piece of the natural world that Egypt depended on had a god behind it. This is not a small detail. This is everything. Because the 10 plagues are not random disasters. They are a systematic, precision dismantling of the Egyptian religious system, one god at a time. Each plague targets a specific deity. Each one is a direct answer to the question Pharaoh asked the very first day Moses walked into his court. Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord, that I should obey him?" The 10 plagues are the answer. Moses has been gone 40 years. He left Egypt as a prince. Raised inside the palace, he is now walking back toward. Educated in the finest scribal schools the ancient world produces. Acts 7:22 says he was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. That wisdom includes mathematics, astronomy, architecture, military strategy, administrative law. He speaks Egyptian as a first language. He ate at royal tables. He wore linen so fine it was almost translucent. He was, by every external measure, a member of the most elite social class on Earth. Then he killed an Egyptian overseer he saw beating a Hebrew slave, buried the body in the sand. By the next morning, the story was already in the streets. Pharaoh found out. Moses ran. He crossed the Sinai Peninsula east into Midian, met a girl at a well, married her, spent the next 40 years as a shepherd, 40 years following sheep across the desert, a man who had been a prince. This is the man God chooses, not a general, not a politician, not someone still connected to the court who knows how to navigate the system. A shepherd who has been out of Egypt so long his Egyptian probably has an accent now. The burning bush. A thorn bush on fire that doesn't burn down. In a dry Middle Eastern landscape, burning bushes are not unusual. But a bush that keeps burning for minutes, then an hour, then more, without the wood turning to ash, that is different. Moses turns aside to look, and from the fire, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Moses hides his face, and then God gives him the assignment. Go to Pharaoh, tell him to release my people. And Moses argues. 5 separate times in Exodus chapters 3 and 4. He gives God a reason why someone else should do this. Who am I to go to Pharaoh? What if they don't believe me? I am not a good speaker. Please send someone else. 5 objections. God answers every single one. And then the text says God's anger burned against Moses. Even so, he goes. He is 80 years old. His brother Aaron, who will speak for him, is 83. 2 old men walking into the capital of the most powerful empire on earth to deliver a message from the God of a slave nation. This is what it looks like before the first plague begins. The first meeting. Moses and Aaron walk into Pharaoh's court. Aaron throws down his staff. It becomes a serpent. Now stop, because this is not random theater. The serpent in Egypt is the most loaded symbol in the entire culture. The uraeus, a cobra rearing up on its hood, sits on Pharaoh's crown. It has sat there for 2,000 years. It represents divine royal authority, the power of the king to destroy his enemies. The Egyptian word for it is ieret, she who rears up. That image is on every crown, every tomb painting, every royal seal. When Aaron's staff becomes a serpent in Pharaoh's own throne room, he is not doing a party trick. He is throwing Pharaoh's own symbol of power on the floor, in front of his entire court. Pharaoh calls his magicians. Their names, Janus and Jambres, are not in Exodus, but Paul names them in 2 Timothy 3:8, which means this tradition was being passed down orally for over 1,000 years before Paul wrote it. They replicate the sign. Their staffs also become serpents. Egyptian priests trained in Heka, sacred magic, new techniques for inducing cataleptic rigidity in cobras by pressing a specific nerve point behind the head, making a live snake appear stiff as a rod. Release the pressure, it moves again. Whether that is what happened here or something else, the text does not explain. It just says they did it. And then Aaron's snake swallows theirs whole. Pharaoh is not moved. His heart is hardened. The Hebrew word used when Pharaoh hardens his own heart is kaved, heavy, like a stone that has become too dense to move. The choice to resist, made enough times, eventually becomes the person making it. This is not a small theological note. It is the psychological portrait that runs underneath every single plague. A man being given reason after reason to believe, choosing not to, until choosing not to is who he is. Plague 1. Blood. Aaron strikes the Nile with his staff. The water turns to blood. Every source of water in Egypt, the river, the canals, the ponds, the water stored in clay pots inside houses, turns to blood. The fish die. The smell reaches Memphis. 7 full days. Now look at what just happened theologically. The Nile is not just a river, it is the lifeblood of the civilization. It is Hapi. It is Khnum. It is the promise that the gods are holding the world together. On the first day, God turns that promise red and makes it stink. The magicians replicate it, which is almost comically destructive. They turn whatever clean water remains into blood too, as if that helps. But it gives Pharaoh the excuse he needs. He turns and goes back inside his palace. His heart is hardened. Round 1, God wins. Pharaoh walks away. Plague 2, frogs. The Nile produces frogs, not some frogs. An infestation so total they enter the bedrooms, the beds, the ovens, the kneading bowls. The kneading bowl is where bread dough is made. The bed is the most private space in the ancient world. The place of intimacy, of family, of rest. Frogs are in both. Every layer of Egyptian life, from the public street to the marriage bed, is invaded. And here is the detail that nobody mentions. The frog goddess Hecate, depicted as a woman with a frog's head, is the goddess of fertility and childbirth. She is the being the Egyptians believe breathes life into newborns at the moment of birth. The animal that represents divine blessing and the beginning of new life is now crawling through Pharaoh's bed. Pharaoh calls Moses. He wants the frogs removed. Moses says, "You tell me when. Name the time and I will pray." And Pharaoh says, "Tomorrow. Not now. Not immediately. Tomorrow." He will sleep one more night in a frog-filled bed rather than surrender even 1 hour of control. That is who Pharaoh is. The frogs die the next day. They pile into heaps across the land until the country smells of rotting frog. Relief comes. Pharaoh hardens. Plague 3. Gnats. The Hebrew word is kinnim. Scholars debate the exact insect. Gnats, lice, mosquitoes. But it is something small, biting, airborne, coming up from the dust of the ground in such numbers that it covers every human and every animal in Egypt. This time, the magicians cannot replicate it. They stand before Pharaoh, his own court magicians, and say 3 words that should have ended everything. This is the finger of God. Exodus 8:19. Literally those words. The most skilled practitioners of Egyptian sacred magic, the men whose entire identity is built on being able to explain and reproduce miraculous signs, they cannot do it. And they are telling Pharaoh to his face that something outside the system they understand is operating here. Pharaoh will not listen. His heart is hardened. Plague 4. Flies, dense swarms, filling the palace, filling every house, ruining the land. That phrase matters. This is the first plague where God draws an explicit line. The flies are everywhere in Egypt, except Goshen, where the Hebrews live. Not one fly in Goshen. This is the plague that removes the possibility of natural explanation. A natural plague does not check ID at the border. A natural infestation does not stop at a geographic line that exactly matches an ethnic boundary. Whatever is doing, this is choosing targets. Pharaoh negotiates for the first time. You can sacrifice to your God, but do it here, inside Egypt. Don't leave. Moses refuses. You must go 3 days into the wilderness. Pharaoh concedes. The flies disappear. Pharaoh retracts the concession the same afternoon. His heart is hardened. It will happen this way 3 more times. Concede under pressure. Withdraw under relief. The pattern is the same every time because the man is the same man every time. Plague 5. Livestock disease. A severe pestilence strikes the cattle, horses, donkeys, camels, the flocks, the herds, all of them, throughout Egypt. Not one animal belonging to the Israelites dies. Pharaoh sends to check. Exodus 9:7 says he personally inquires and discovers that not a single Israelite animal is dead. This is important. He now has empirical evidence, confirmed by his own investigation, that a distinction is being made between 2 populations by something he cannot explain and cannot replicate. This is not faith. This is data, his own data. His heart is hardened. Plague 6, boils. Moses takes soot from a furnace. Some translations say kilnash, and throws it into the air before Pharaoh. It becomes fine dust spreading across all of Egypt. Boils breaking out in sores on people and animals everywhere. The magicians cannot stand before Moses. The text says the boils are on the magicians themselves. The men who had previously matched 2 of the first plagues are now sitting on the ground, unable to get up because of the sores on their bodies. Every human representative of Egyptian sacred power has been physically incapacitated. There is nobody left to say, we can do this too. Pharaoh's heart is hardened. And now, for the first time, the text says God hardens it. We have crossed a threshold. The choices Pharaoh made freely have produced a condition that is now described as something God is doing. The stone is too dense to move on its own anymore. Plague 7, hail. This is where the language changes completely. Exodus 9:18. I will send the worst hailstorm that has ever fallen on Egypt from the day it was founded until now. The worst in recorded history. God announces it in advance. And then, something extraordinary. He tells Moses to warn the Egyptians. Bring your servants and your livestock inside. Whatever is left in the field will die. Some Egyptians obey. Exodus 9:20 says, those officials of Pharaoh who feared the word of the Lord hurried to bring their slaves and their livestock inside. There are Egyptians, not Israelites, Egyptians, who hear this warning and act on it. They do not know the God delivering the warning, but they believe the warning is real, and those who believed it saved their servants and their animals. The hail comes with thunder and lightning so intense, the text says fire ran along the ground. Everything left in the field is destroyed. The flax crop is ruined. Egypt's linen industry, one of its primary sources of wealth, gone in an afternoon. The barley is gone. The wheat survives only because it grows late and hadn't emerged yet. God is leaving one harvest standing, one partial economic lifeline, because this is not yet the final blow. Only Goshen has no hail. Pharaoh calls Moses. For the first time, he says something that sounds like real acknowledgement. This time I have sinned. The Lord is in the right, and I and my people are in the wrong. Moses looks at him and says, I know you do not yet fear the Lord. He is telling Pharaoh to his face that he can see through the words. The hail stops. Pharaoh hardens. Plague 8. Locusts. An east wind blows all night. By morning, the locusts cover the face of the entire land so densely that the ground cannot be seen. They eat every plant that survived the hail, every fruit on every remaining tree, every green thing. Before this plague, something happens that most people skip over completely. Pharaoh's own officials go to him, not Moses, not Aaron, his own advisors, and they say, do you not yet realize that Egypt is ruined? Exodus 10:7. His entire court is begging him. The men who have watched every plague from inside the palace are standing in front of the most powerful man on earth telling him, it is over, stop this. Pharaoh partially concedes. The men can go, but the women and children must stay behind. Moses refuses. We go with everyone and everything, or we do not go. A west wind drives every locust into the Red Sea. Not one locust remains in all of Egypt. Pharaoh hardens. Plague 9. Darkness. Moses stretches his hand toward heaven, and there is darkness over all the land of Egypt for 3 days. Not an overcast sky, not a sandstorm that passes in a few hours. The Hebrew word is choshek, total, absolute darkness. The text says people could not see one another. Nobody could move from where they were for 3 full days. The Israelites had light in their homes. Now understand what this means in the Egyptian religious system. Ra is not simply the sun god. Ra is the most important deity in the entire 2,000 being pantheon. The daily journey of Ra across the sky, born at sunrise as Khepri, reaching full power at noon as Ra, dying at sunset as Atum, traveling through the underworld at night, being reborn at dawn. This cycle is the engine of cosmic order itself. Every ritual in Egypt is timed to Ra's movement. The king's divinity flows from his identity as the son of Ra. The entire civilization is organized around the certainty that the sun will rise every morning. For 3 days, it does not rise. For 3 days, Ra is gone. This is not a natural disaster. This is a theological catastrophe. It is proof, visible to every Egyptian in every city from Memphis to Thebes, that the being they have organized their entire civilization around cannot defend himself against whatever is doing this to him. Pharaoh calls Moses one final time. You can all go, men, women, children, but the flocks must stay. Moses says, not one hoof stays behind. We don't know yet which animals will be needed for the sacrifice. Every animal comes with us. Pharaoh explodes. Get out of my sight. If I see your face again, you will die. Moses says, you are right. You will not see my face again. He turns and walks out. And God tells him, there is one more plague. After this one, Pharaoh will not just let you go. He will drive you out. The instructions Moses gives the Israelites before the final plague are the most specific in the entire Bible. Take a lamb, not any lamb, a male, 1 year old, without defect. Select it on the 10th day of the month. Keep it with you until the 14th day, 4 days in your home, so you know this specific animal. At twilight on the 14th day, slaughter it. Take the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel, the top beam of the doorframe, of the house where you eat. Roast the meat. Eat it with bitter herbs and unleavened bread. Eat it with your cloak tucked into your belt. Sandals on your feet, staff in your hand. Eat it standing up. Eat it fast. This is the Lord's Passover. The blood on the door is the sign. When God passes through Egypt that night, he will pass over every house with blood on the doorframe. Every house without it, the plague will enter. Midnight. The Lord strikes every firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh on his throne to the firstborn of the prisoner in the dungeon. Every firstborn of every animal. The Hebrew word for firstborn is bashor, not just the oldest child, but a specific legal category, the one who carried the inheritance, the one who represented the family's continuation into the future, the one who held the highest position, the greatest honor, the first claim on everything the family owned. In one night, every family in Egypt loses its Bachor. Pharaoh rises in the middle of the night, he and all his officials and all the Egyptians. Exodus 12:30 says there was not a house where someone was not dead. And there arose a great cry in Egypt. That cry is the sound of the most powerful civilization on earth breaking. Pharaoh calls for Moses and Aaron in the night, not in the morning, in the night. He doesn't wait for sunrise, and he says, go, take your people, take your flocks, take your herds, take everything you have, go, serve the Lord as you have said. And then, this is the line nobody preaches on, he says, and also bless me. The man who on day 1 asked, who is the Lord that I should obey him? That man, in the middle of the night, surrounded by the wailing of an entire nation with his own firstborn dead, is asking a shepherd to ask his God for a blessing. The Egyptians press gold and silver jewelry and fine clothing into the hands of the Israelites as they go. Exodus 12:36 uses the Hebrew word nitzalu. They stripped or plundered Egypt. An empire that owned these people for 430 years is giving them its jewelry to make them leave faster. 600,000 fighting men leave that night, plus women and children, and a mixed multitude of other peoples who joined the Exodus. Egyptians, Nubians, others who had watched 10 plagues and decided to follow the God who sent them. The bread they take has no time to rise. Flat, unleavened, still eaten today at Passover tables around the world as the direct, unbroken memory of how fast they had to move. Here is what happened. The most powerful civilization on Earth, the one with the doctors and the mathematicians, the one whose pyramids have been standing for over 1,000 years and will stand for 3,000 more, the one with 2,000 gods protecting every corner of the natural world, lost 10 rounds in a row to a shepherd and his older brother. Not to an army, not to a political uprising, not to a military strategy. 2 men with a staff, and every single plague targeted something specific. The Nile, Hapi, the frogs, Heket, the livestock, Hathor, the sun, Ra. Each one was not a random disaster. Each one was a direct answer to a direct God. Each one said, this piece of the world you think belongs to your gods, it doesn't. The God of the Hebrew slaves made it. He owns it, and he can take it back whenever he chooses. The Passover meal is still eaten every year, by Jewish families on every continent. The same bitter herbs, the same unleavened bread, the same lamb. The youngest child still asks, why is this night different from all other nights? Why is it different? Because on every other night we were slaves. On this night we were free. Egypt, the bread sellers, the priests with their morning duck offerings, the children running between gold columns, the civilization that had never once imagined any power greater than its own, woke up the morning after Passover with its economy gone, its labor force gone, its firstborn sons in the ground, and its Pharaoh in the dark asking a slave's God for a blessing. And the slave's God had already moved on. The pillar of cloud was already rising at the edge of Goshen. The sea was already waiting. The most extraordinary rescue operation in human history was just beginning. If this changed the way you see this story, not just as a Sunday school lesson, but as something that happened to real people in the most powerful city on the planet, share it with someone who needs to see it differently. Subscribe and hit the bell, because the story does not end at the sea. And what happens next is something most people have never heard the full version.